Welcome to Listening with China Blue. This is a podcast that focuses on how listening not only informs us about what is occurring in the world around us, but also helps us connect with others, build stronger businesses, strengthens our mental health, and become more creative and compassionate individuals. As more and more people practice attentive listening in a community, it becomes a community-building practice that strengthens our mental health as we learn from our neighbors. I will be interviewing people from all walks of life to learn how listening has informed them in their field and helped them to make intelligent decisions. They will be artists, musicians, composers, dancers, business people, psychologists, neuroscientists, and Buddhists, to name a few. About me, I'm an internationally exhibiting sound-based artist. In my work, Discovering Unheard Sounds, I realized that the core component that drove my work was simply listening. That realization put me on the path of speaking about and helping people learn to become better listeners. I began with leading sound walks, which I continue to do in the upstate New York region, to help people learn to listen from nature. And now, tune your ears to this podcast to learn about the power of listening. And do pay attention until the end for further information on how to start your own listening practice, share it with others, and to support Listening with China Blue. My next guest is Richard Humann, who is a New York City-based American neo-conceptual artist. With his work, he delves deeply into concepts and ideas, using a multitude of materials to create his installations, sculptures, videos, and sound projects. I'm speaking to him today about his current exhibition, Tomorrow I Will Miss You, at the Leonovich Gallery in New York City. This work is based on bone music, a common black market practice in the 50s and 60s, devised to smuggle in music that was banned into the Iron Curtain. In the exhibition are over 60 singles made on X-rays and a video player playing them. The exhibition will be up through December 20th. Welcome, Richard.
Hello, China Blue.
So great to have you here.
Thank you very much.
In my second podcast, I interviewed you about your work and listening in your studio. So I thought that this would be a great time to follow up with you in light of your new exhibition, which has a fascinating premise for making music that's all about listening.
Yes, well, yes, music plays a very big part of my new exhibition. It's the central theme of the entire show, actually.
And, I'd like to talk to you a little bit further about the basis of your exhibition. I know you have a background as a songwriter, and that's something that has not been in the forefront. And so I wanted to talk to you about writing the lyrics for American Nomads.
Yeah, so I don't actually write the songs. I do write the lyrics for them. I've been doing it now for 15 years, actually. In one iteration or another, American Nomads really began in 2015, but I began writing lyrics for what was to become American Nomads since 2010, actually. So it began in 2010. And we've spoken on the side about this, but I was in Budapest, and I flew to Croatia. Walter is originally from Croatia. He's one of the lead singers of the band. And Susan and I, my wife, is one of the other lead singers of American Nomads. And we were visiting them in Croatia on the beach. And Walter said, "Hey, can you write lyrics for songs?" Because I had written a book of poetry. And I said yes. And on the flight back to Budapest, I wrote lyrics, which became the very first song of the band. And since then, there's 80 songs in the catalog.
That's so amazing, because I know you primarily as a visual artist, and I've learned about your songwriting and American Nomads over the years and didn't think about it in the forefront of my mind. But now that you're doing this great exhibition, it's interesting to see how you brought visual art and music together under one umbrella.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, my lyrics of this particular action don't play a major part of it. There's history involved in it, there's music involved in it, and of course there's the visual art as well. It's a conceptual exhibition that encompasses all three of those entities actually into it, and a bit of politics as well, to be honest, although I'm not a political artist. But, there's a lot of things happening all at the same time.
Right, right. And so I wanted to delve into those. I guess we can do them one by one.
Sure, sure.
So maybe we should talk about the premise of it and tell us about bone music.
Well, bone music is it's something that has a place in history, behind the Iron Curtain in the Soviet Union, late 50s, early 1960s, and where Western music and Western ideas were banned. So this underground movement happened where people were burning songs onto X-rays. They would go to hospitals and dumpsters and get X-rays, and the way we burn music onto vinyl records, they were burning them onto X-rays at that time. Songs like Elvis or the Beatles, of course, were the one of the big ones, right? And I've always joked, like, Reagan said, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall," and I always say, well, it wasn't Reagan that brought the wall down. It was the Beatles and Levi Strauss that did. It was like the idea of blue jeans and the Beatles brought down the wall, because it was the Western ideas, and did that, and contemporary music and literature and art and blue jeans, right? So my show is kind of like based on that idea, where there's this, contraband, black market contraband going around, and I didn't actually use real X-rays to burn onto. I could have, by the way, but they don't hold up. They disintegrate, and so I needed something that was archival. So what I did was I bought 100 or more X-rays, which I scanned, and then created these 7.5 inch by 7.5 inch square discs that I burned music onto, and that's what's on the walls of the gallery. This polyvinyl disc and the music that's burned. So that's what's on the walls of the gallery space right now.
That's amazing.
There's 66 of them total that fit in the gallery. Yeah, 2 feet apart.
Does each one have a different song? How is that devised?
Well, there are 6 songs, and those 6 songs are distributed over 66. So there's 11. Each one's an original piece because each one has an original X-ray that's been mounted to it. But there are each song has 11 vinyl pressings on it, and we get the vinyl. The process was kind of wild. I had to contact Third Man Records, which is Jack White's company. They were really helpful in getting me pointed in the right direction here. This was a year ago. And so I believe the polyvinyl comes from their production, goes to a guy in Queens who then takes my music, which I record here in Brooklyn, and burns it onto it. And then I have to get the X-ray scans to another group of people that printed out an archival clear film, and then it all gets mounted to the back, and then I have to sit and cut the hole out to be able to put on the record player. So
Oh,
it's quite a process to go through.
sounds extremely complicated.
It's more complicated in arranging it. Once the process began, it was just a matter of guiding it in all the right direction under the deadline.
Sure.
Yeah, like anything else, like anything else.
But
But
so tell me about the songs and the lyrics.
well, so I wanted to copy copy is the wrong word. I wanted to copy the feeling and the sentiment of the time, right? I wanted to bring that in as an overarching theme to what's going on. So I wrote songs I wrote lyrics first, right? That were in the vein of Elvis or Pete Seeger or the Beatles is the final one, right? Because the Ed Sullivan performance in February of '64, changed the entire world. And the Ozzy Osbourne of all people said they woke up that morning in black and white, and after the Ed Sullivan show, the world was in color, right? That's one of his paraphrasing, things,
Wow.
but it's true. And so I went through and wrote in the style of a Pete Seeger a protest song on the steps of Union Square, right? And then I wrote songs like Life Ain't Funny When You Wake Up Dead. That's kind of an Elvis type of thing. And, then I have other music in between. I have like a Bob Dylan song, Tie-Dyed in the Wool. These are not Bob Dylan songs. These are my songs that kind of like the sentiment, though, is like that. There's protest, or there's, there was like, to me, lyrics are super important. The way that I grew up listening to music, the lyrics are equally, if not more important to me than the actual music itself, because it says something, right? So you know, again, for me, it's like, I Am the Walrus, or, Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, the Animals, or these were the things that really inspired me early on lyrically. Um, and so I wanted to put that much effort into the writing of the songs this time. I do that with American Nomads also. I write songs, and the difference is I write 15 lyrics for every one song that gets produced. With the way I created this, all my lyrics were produced into music for this exhibition, which is
Right.
100%, rate for me, rare. I'm usually in the 10% rate or less. Um, but that's just because musicians, they get my lyrics, and they have to be inspired at that moment in time by that particular set of lyrics. Sometimes it comes back 5 years later and they make the song. But anyway, so I wanted to make this kind of an amalgamation of politics, music, art, and like, again, the theme overall of like the time that we're living in right now is important too. And I feel that there's kind of a direct correlation of what's happening now in America and in the world, um, that I feel is kind of like connecting to the way it was back then. I feel like, there's parallels happening right now. So I thought it was a timely time to do this.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
Tell me about the title of the exhibition, Tomorrow I Will Miss You. What does that
Well,
come?
that's directly from a Beatles song. That's, close your eyes and I'll kiss you. Tomorrow I'll miss you. It's oh God, I'll have to run through the whole lyrics to remember what the title of the song is. But yeah, so it just directly comes from a Beatles, and I took line and then created a Beatle-esque type of song out of that,
Uh-huh.
which was, again, at that Beatles, they're talking more fun things about kissing and about holding hand. I want to hold your hand, or, later on, of course, like I mentioned, they're talking Tomorrow Never Knows or I Am the Walrus. They're much more politically and worldview of stuff. But I'm mimicking the early Beatles, early Stones, early Elvis, stuff like that is what I'm kind of mimicking here for this exhibition, which is timely to that period of bone music. So I'm keeping it within the paradigm of that.
Oh, wow. That's so tightly conceived.
Yeah, I had a lot of time to do it, so.
Now, you had mentioned to me that the music is AI driven. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
So I felt that was important. Got the full band here. That I live in a firehouse in Brooklyn. Janet and Walter, the other lead singer, owns the firehouse, and I've been living here 40 years. Was my art studio first, and then we have a full recording studio. I have access to the band. The band is recording now with Sammy Marandino. They work with Joe Vitale, and there's a new album coming out with Neil Dorsman, who's Grammy winning producer. And okay, I could use these guys. So early on, my thought was, let me write this stuff and ask them to make these like 1950s, 1960s type of songs. And it just felt contrived. I didn't feel like I couldn't find a reason really to make that happen like that, to ask them to pull out of the groove of what they do, which is this, Americana roots rock type of stuff. And so I went into the idea of revolutionary idea of creating AI. So the idea of this is revolution, right? So bone music is revolution. That time period is revolution. And my thought was, well, what's revolution now? And AI is revolutionary. Love it or hate it. I don't love it, believe me. But I wanted to try to utilize this to see what I could produce from it. So in the exhibition, not only do I paste the lyrics on the wall as this kind of key, this guide to the show, I'm also putting in all the prompts there as well, like the meta tags that I need to use to create the songs themselves. And so there, it's a journey into like the back end of it, the back end of the lyrics, even to the point I put verse or chorus or refrain or, bridge. I'm giving these notations along the way as how the music was created and how the the lyrics were created as well and how a song is composed. So it's a back end view as well as the front end view of the music that you can listen to on SoundCloud or in the exhibition itself. I'm not sure if that's answering your question or
Oh,
not, but
sure. That gives me a visual of the layout and how it operated. I was fascinated by how people were actually paying attention to all the text on the wall because as you
me too.
walk in the door, there are, I think, 4 or 5
Six.
long texts on the
Yeah,
wall.
6 songs, one for each song, and then of course an overview of the exhibition itself to
Yeah.
give people an idea. Yeah.
So
Yep.
it's lots and lots of text, and usually people just are accustomed to 3 lines and they're on, to something else. So I was I was intrigued by the fact that everybody was standing there reading through the whole text and then actually using the QR codes to listen into the songs.
Well, you and I both, because it warmed my heart to see that, to be honest. I mean, at any given time, 15, 20 people were actually like going onto the QR code and listening to the music on SoundCloud, right? Or reading
Hmm.
through the whole text and coming up to me and asking me like pointed questions about it, meaning they actually did that. And it felt good that it wasn't just this decoration that people walk past, as you say, which normally I would do too sometimes at an opening.
Well,
Um,
yeah, and in general, through in art exhibitions, having lots and lots of text is not beneficial because people are there to see the work. So this turns everything on its tail.
Yeah, and I think it helps that their lyrics, and also just these short prompts, right? So it's not this like loaded, uh, tons of paragraphs of information. It's a little more welcoming, I think, and I think that also helps. And if you go into the back room, the music is playing throughout the exhibition, but there's something I wanted to make it where people can log on from their homes as well to be able to listen to the music. And quite honestly, the music creating this kind of blew my mind because I was able to really hone in on a particular sound. And also I worked it as well. After I created it, I brought it into my recording, program. And at that point I created mono from it. I was able to tweak it out a bit. And I even added dust and scratch sounds to mimic that of the vinyl. So you're hearing it in a way as if it would come through a vinyl record. So I did a lot of post on it as well in my studio, in the
Wow.
recording studio.
Wow. Yeah, that's impressive that you did that kind of post-production on it too.
Well, we do a lot. Generally, I'm the hands-on guy, but we're working with the producer a lot with this stuff. So just through osmosis, I was able to pick up and learn how to do it on my own.
So, did you say that in the exhibition room in the back, all the songs are playing?
Yes, there's a that night it was pretty crowded that you were there, so I don't know if you were able to hear that or not. But and we should say that the gallery is a Lenovich Gallery at 520 West 24th Street, and the show is up from November 6th to December 20th. So there's a lot of time to go see the exhibition, and if you go into the back room, there is a video on the floor of a turntable that I filmed, and then Matt Hennian was so kind. He's an LA director and in the film business. He was so kind to put everything together, and the music plays. It's just this constant loop of music playing. I actually feel bad for the gallery assistants who have to listen to it all day. But,
Well,
so
by the time the exhibition will be done, they will be able to sing every single one of the songs.
right, or be in a mental institution, one or the other. Yeah, so if you go in the back, you can walk around, and as you're walking, you can look at the X-rays on the wall, and the music is playing, and theoretically, you'd be able to take the X-ray off the wall and put it right onto a turntable and play it because it has the grooves burned into it, and they are in fact records. You are looking at records on the wall.
Oh, that's so amazing. I was wondering about that. I was wondering if you could actually play one. So it that makes it sort of a collectible record.
Yeah, a little more pricier than a regular record, but yes,
Sure.
the no. I'm just saying it's like, but yes. So when if people do buy this, and obviously that's part of the game here, right, in the gallery world, but you would get that. You could definitely play it, or you would also get a wave file. So in other words, the song that you're buying would comes with a wave file, or an MP3 that allows you to listen to the song. But yes, you could literally take it off the wall. I have them mounted with handmade metal brackets, so it kind of just holds it up on the wall for presentation. You could slide it right out, put it on your record player, and play it. And I've done it. I've played multiple of them.
And it's interesting to see the way that it's installed on the wall because you have, as you were saying, you have these brackets. What the brackets do is they hold the record off of the wall by a couple of inches, so light comes behind them, and they really look like X-rays, as if you were holding an X-ray up to the light and seeing the light through them, so you could see somebody's jaw or somebody's thigh or some. What other body parts did you X-ray?
Yeah. Well, so I ended up buying, from different doctors' offices. I got all kinds of body parts: skull, shoulders, pancreas, like all different things, and knee joints and hip joints, and but I also ended up buying, from veterinary offices also, as well as dental offices. So I have dental up there, and I've got dogs, and I kept them actual size. But some of these actually come. You could see the dog's chain or the cone that they wear on their head when they're not feeling well. Uh,
Oh.
so yeah, but they don't appear on these X-rays. Those are the larger X-rays. So I have dogs and cats, and I've got different animals and many dental as well. So I have a lot of dental work up there too, from people. Yes, we're 100 X-rays altogether.
Oh my gosh. So you can
Yeah.
actually see some of the structural problems?
Yeah, I mean, you can. Some of them have, pins in their bones that have been put back together again, or you can see like crooked teeth that have been smashed, or braces on one. Yeah, so it's all there. I mean, and that's kind of also like another underlying theme here is, so there's like this human factor, not to kind of factor in my own name into that, but there's like this human factor that kind of juxtapositions the AI aspect of this, right? And there's this transparency. So when I gave you the meta tags in the back end of the lyrics, it's as transparent as the X-rays themselves, right? So it's the idea of looking into the body, into the inner workings of something. So that also plays an aspect of the exhibition too. You're looking into the creation of the music. You're not just listening, but seeing as well, seeing the writing, seeing the programming, seeing how the sausage is made. You know what I mean? Like you're actually seeing how it's done, and just like you're seeing the inner working of the X-ray itself. So there's a conceptual correlation between those as well in the exhibition.
That's so amazing. Because
Thank
when you put together music and visual art, it can be cumbersome marriage.
Agree. By the way, I totally agree. And I think the most difficult part of this process for me, and I'm lucky I did have a year. Katya Lenovich, the owner of the gallery, and I agreed a year ago to do the exhibition. And I had this full year to kind of sit on this and think. And most of it was, I've had this idea in my head for quite a while now, but most of this was like distillation. It was more about what not to do, not what to do. Because I start off with these huge process ideas, And most of this was really editing. I edited it down to what you're looking at, to this kind of minimalist show that packs a conceptual punch, but not so much that it's overwhelming. So really, it could have been really cumbersome, but I edited along the way. And that was the most difficult part. That was what I labored over the most, was the editing process of what not to include in here. You tend to say too much sometimes, right? And
Oh,
I needed to speak with a voice, like one single voice on this.
and talking about the minimalist installation, I found quite fascinating because in art exhibitions, usually artists try to go as big as possible and as dramatic as possible to fill the wall, to make a statement, to make it colorful, to make it dramatic. And what you see in your exhibition is quite the opposite. We have a 7-inch by 7-inch piece of art mounted in one row that
Yes,
you
across the
could
gallery.
be
Yeah,
around
all surfaces.
the total gallery. So it creates a big tension in the viewer based on what to expect. But I think that having the text in the beginning sets up a premise to think closely and to be intimate with the work so that it sets up that kind of relationship with the displays.
Yeah, thank you. And originally, so my original thought was to create the gallery is just a massive space. So my first thought was to make these big pieces and then do like small record that I would pull out of a big piece. And I was living with that for 6 months until finally I realized it's not necessary. Like it was just wasn't necessary. And I don't want to put anything into a gallery space, museum space, that is not necessary. It's just I don't want extra. I want it distilled down to its basic communicative form. And that's all my work is about, that, you know. So I edited it down from these big pieces down to these 7.5 inch by 7.5 inch squares. And I arranged them in a timeline. So when you walk into the gallery, the pieces on the left start the late 1950s sound, and they eventually end when you walk around the full gallery with the 1964 Beatlesque type of music. So it's a linear timeline through the gallery as well.
Amazing.
Thank you. I mean, so
I'm just I'm pausing as I'm reimagining it because
okay.
I was there at the opening, and it was I want to add that it was a well attended opening. It was quite nice to see so many people there, really enjoying it and talking about the work, which is something that's not often done in art exhibitions. Usually, people are more engaged with talking to each other than talking about the art. But they were actually talking about it. And it was nice to see that so many people were engaged with it.
I was very grateful that so many people came, and it really was it was a jam-packed house, and I was really humbled and grateful for that. And I was also amazed that so much of it was about the work itself, because even like I say, we go to openings all the time, right? And you and I both, and every artist does that. And a lot of times it's to meet and greet, shake hands, support your friends, or and then kind of leave and go get a drink somewhere, right? So I was
Mhm.
amazed. Many people came up to me and really asked questions about the work, which I felt was rare. And I was grateful about that and very happy to explain and talk about it as well.
It's amazing to have work that enables people to communicate with each other. I think that that is an interesting thing that art can do, and yet little is spoken about how art can act as a conduit to create communities. And you had this moment forming this evening of community and conversation around it. Of course, there was alcohol involved.
Not for me, but
But I'm just adding that as just a
I
silly
know,
side. But
I know. No, and it was good though. And the thing, me the next day or called me, or I think part of that is like just the fact that music, many people were interested in that. Like, what was that about? So it based premise on that part of history, which makes it a good starting point for conversation. So, a lot of people wanted to know more about that. They didn't know this. It's just something I stumbled upon, a few years ago. Wow, that's a good. Sometimes as a conceptual artist, also, you come across something you're like that could be really good, and I jot it down in my notebook, and then 3 years later, somehow it resurfaces into something, and then you develop it into a full blown concept, and that's what happened here. You know. But
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm really happy with everything. I think overall the video, which plays the music in the back, is good because it's another clue as to what's happening. So between the type, explanation, the lyrics, and then that music, it gives you a kind of an overview if you're interested enough to find out. So it's not just visual as well. There's more going on here. It's audio. There's a lot of listening involved here, listening as well as reading and seeing the show itself.
I wanted to talk to you a little bit also about, you alluded to it earlier about the political content. Would you like to speak a little bit more in depth about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, so look, it's impossible in this world nowadays, no matter what, right? You could say I'm not political, and by saying you're not political, it's a political statement nowadays, right? So I grew up in a household that my mother was a liberal Democrat. I grew up in a house that she was another mother for peace, Martin Luther King supporter, believed in equal rights. We had a sign in our living room that said a woman's place is in the House and in the Senate. She was about women's rights. I grew up like this. I had a POW bracelet since I was like 8 years old, and the first concert I ever went to, she brought my sister and I to when we were like 4 years old. I went to see Pete Seeger in some, Clearwater sloop protest for the Hudson River and against the Vietnam War. And on the other end, my father, who just passed away on September 25th, my father in those days was a conservative Republican, what they call a Goldwater Republican. And so I grew up in a house that every single night there were political discussions. My father took the position of a conservative Republican, my mother a liberal Democrat, and every single night over dinner they talked about the Vietnam War, they talked about unequal rights, they talked about the civil rights movement every single night, and they didn't argue. I never heard really arguing. I heard discussions about it.
Yeah.
So I grew up being able to honestly see both sides, but I see both sides of an issue. I understand certain things about things. And so I my whole view is about duality or dichotomous views on life. And we're living in an era right now which is, I think, more politically charged than even the era I grew up in, which was under, the Nixon regime. It was political back then, and we are either more so or at least climbing to that level right now. So for me, it's impossible not to have that like seep into your everyday life. If you look at Twitter or you look at Facebook or Instagram, it's there. You can't get around it. And so this is kind of like I'm creating work under that same kind of umbrella of time that we're doing right now. And I could either pretend it doesn't exist, or I could at least acknowledge that it exists. I'm not taking a point of view here. I'm just acknowledging that this is the point in time that we're at right now. And we are. This is where we are right now.
Oh, it's dramatic right now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's super, super drama on every level, right? So and I grew up with that. So really, this is like, and by the way, just so you know, too, speaking of listening, which is what the podcast is, during that time period, my father, was not really into music, and I grew up. He came from like this German Stoic household. And so we didn't really, other than the political discussion, we didn't talk a lot about things at dinner, and music didn't play in the house. And my dad worked 3 jobs and put himself through college. They were very young when they had me. And so the minute he left, my mother would put on the Woodstock album, or she would put on the Stones. I remember her buying Abbey
Nice.
Road. I went to the music store when she bought Abbey Road. I mean, I grew up with this kind of music in my life, so this is as much part of my life as art or the literature that I read. This is part of my life. So it just made sense to incorporate all of it together for an exhibition of
And
this magnitude at a gallery of such like this.
yeah, and you synthesized it well. I think
Yeah.
that's an enormous hurdle for artists when we are working in multiple directions like this and incorporating technology and dancing between something like music and visual art to synthesize it into a work that is cohesive is, I think, the biggest challenge. Because as you were mentioning, when you're working through the idea, you come up with a number of different permutations, but the question will be which one will be the most successful.
Exactly.
And just shooting from the hip and just picking one is not the best solution because oftentimes there will be an error in the sense that it is too heavy in the music or too heavy in the visuals or too heavy in the political. So the whole process of synthesizing it, as you stated, even one section of it can take 6 months.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the closest thing I could say about this is maybe making a film, right, where you're balancing visual, audio, story together, right? And I just produced a film that's being edited now. So you go into that world, and it's like talk about a delicate balance of walking this tightrope. And what we're doing when you work in multimedia the way that you do and the way that I do is like that. It's a tightrope walk through. It just is. Or like, those guys that the logs that float in the water, and the guys that like walk on those logs, like or that's what you're doing. Like we're walking down a log, and you make it all the way toward the end and you fall in, you still fall in. The idea is to get all the way through that log, and that's what it's like here. I'm like walking on a floating log in the river, and
You're trying to navigate around the icebergs
exactly, and
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 the
so
refuge.
it's true though, and so it's a balance, and you hope at the end like that you're not stuck in just one direction, because that could really tip it over. I mean, it's trying to balance it all out. So I'm trying to have equal branches here of art, music, visual, politics, and all mixed together. And the lyrics, of course, because the lyrics guide the whole premise of the exhibition. They do. You read the lyrics, and it's all about there's a linear time path from the lyrics from early throughout, and I'm a little simple at first and get a little more complex at different parts, and just like music does, lyrics, Anyway, so that's what I was attempting to do with the exhibition.
Oh, yeah, I understand. I understand. Um, I can't wait to see where this exhibition goes from here. I think it has legs, as they say, and it will be
Okay.
fabulous to see what other opportunities there will be to present the work. Whether it will be, because there are many different ways that this kind of work can be shown or heard again.
Yes, absolutely. I'm already thinking of different ways that I can manifest this. It can go on its own, or there are different ways to expand on the concept here. And right now I'm jotting down little notes for later on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, but and also on the other hand, I just got an invite to do an exhibition in Pakistan, and so I'm like, my mind is okay. How can I make a variation? Like just a music composer will make a variation on a theme. I'm thinking, well, I want this exact show in Pakistan in Karachi, but maybe there's a little variation of this theme that I can include into that. Take it elsewhere in a different manifestation of what I've created here. So that's where I'm at right now, and that happens on the subway or over a cup of decaf coffee, because I only do decaf. Um, But so, that happens as you're walking to the subway maybe. But I'm planting in the back of my head. And then hopefully something grows from it. Another concept grows out of it as well.
Yeah, and that's a nice way to think about it, of planting it in your head. I think I find that that works well for me when I just write a note down on a sketchbook and as a casual thought of, well, maybe this might be a way to, or a new version of this concept. And then once it goes down, it gives me a place to muse about it.
Agreed. I do that. I do that all the time, actually. It's just there,
Yeah,
I don't ruminate on something. It more is just kind of in the back of my head, and then people ask, "Well, how do you get your ideas?" I'm like, "Oh, I have thousands floating around back there. It's which one do you pick out to create is the difficult part of it, right?"
right, right. My nephew one time when he was very young said to me, "Where do ideas come from?" It was a really well phrased question, and I had to think about that for a long time in order
Right,
to
right.
answer. Where do they come from?
Well, back in college, it was pot and acid, but back now it's decaf coffee and vegetarian food. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, it's hard to say where it comes from. They're there all the time, and one just pops into your head. Often it's by having the opportunity. Really, for me, is what does it. And I'm actually in the middle of writing an article about this for a publication about the process of ideas to creation, and it's like it's an opportunity will do that. Somebody gives you an opportunity to show, and then it kind of triggers, and then you step into that room of all the ideas that are floating around. You grab one and take it and see if you can work it out. Is how it works for me. The ideas are just there. It's just grabbing one and then seeing what you do with it afterwards, whether it survives that process or not. And if it doesn't survive, you toss it aside and grab a new one.
Yeah,
Well, first off, thank you for coming down to the opening. I really appreciate that. And, I thank Katya. As you know, Elga Wim curated the exhibition. Katya, of course, with her amazing gallery, the space. And, I mean, just again, the gallery itself and what she does with that gallery is just amazing to me. And I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to exhibit there.
I'm so pleased you are. And it sounds like you're signing off.
No, no, no. I'm not signing off. I wanted to get it in before we lost it. If I were to go into a kind of like the same route that we're talking, but a little bit differently, it would be like how these different disciplines come together, not just for my exhibition, but let's talk about the idea of like a film, let's say, right, which is big in the art world now too. And I'm making films too, right? And how you then have to create this universe. Like when you're making a film, let's say, you're creating a universe. As an artist, the gallery itself is the universe. So the museum that you're putting it into is the universe that you're showing in an existing universe already, right? Although it's just this kind of amorphous white box. But I find things interesting. By the way, I don't really find those multimedia things all that interesting. Some of them are fantastic, of course, but most are lame, in my opinion. Excuse me, I don't mean to offend anybody who makes these things. Like the Van Gogh exhibition, or when you walk in and there's like sunflowers projected on you or something like that. I've never went, so I don't know firsthand. But I find it fascinating, like when you're attacking multiple disciplines for one. I think for me, how they balance together, which we touched about before, is really important to come together as the whole. And I know that you do that as well. You do sound and you do visuals and you incorporate science into your work. So the idea is like, how do you do that, and how do you convey your message, and also how do you convey your message so you're not giving a lecture about something
Yeah,
that's interesting to people, right? Poetic in a way, right? And so you have to find the art in the middle of all of that. Like I don't want to just say this is bad and this is good
right.
in the midst of like what was going on. things were being banned, and humanity succeeds, right? It just succeeds. And also, like, the idea of banning anything, and I really mean this, goes against my grain, right? It goes against everything I stand for, banning anything at all, right? And excuse my German pronunciation here, but Hendrik Heine, and I'm sure I pronounced his name wrong, to paraphrase him, said, "Men that burn books soon burn men," and that we shouldn't forget that, because men that burn books soon burn men is true. And it starts off by banning something that somebody doesn't like about religion or a word, or saying something free speech. And then it turns into really this totalitarian regime controlling everything that we do and think. And I'm not taking it to that level. But so there's something about this for me. It's like, that's what I think piqued my interest here, is when we start banning books from libraries, and we start banning ideas, and we start saying, well, the sky in a painting is blue, it's not green or red, which means, you're either mentally unbalanced, or you're a revolutionary that should be locked away. And I have problems with this. And this kind of where this comes from with me. I've always had an issue about that, banning anything for me. I think that people are smart enough to understand if something is right or wrong, or good or bad, or something that they want to be interested in. But every day we're talking now further and further about the idea of suppressing information, or banning thinking, or banning speeches, or banning what we can listen to, or whatever. And that's kind of where this began for me as well.
Or
So
ban what can be said.
yeah, what can be said or what can't be said, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And we cannot, not only as a country, call ourselves a free nation if we start banning people's ideas and their thoughts and their speech and their writings. We just can't do that. You pick one or the other, right? And also, just as human beings, we have the right to speak our minds, to think our thoughts, to read what we're reading, or to listen to what we listen to. And that's like, that was, the impetus, kind of, in a way, that started as the seed of my exhibition. And from there, and the crazy part was that particular time period, and I've mentioned it before, I touched on it. It wasn't like the songs were about intense revolutionary thoughts. I want to hold your hand, is the song, or Love Me Do. These are the songs that were coming out. So it wasn't like these were messages of revolution or takeover. They're just the music itself, and the sound, and the dynamics of the sound are what changed the world. And that's why my lyrics are not so revolutionary. Even the song I wrote, Tie Dyed in the Wool, is more about, it's kind of like a fun Dylan-esque song about, a family. And the idea, instead of dyed in the wool, they're tie dyed in the wool, meaning it reference to the tie-dye period of that, the 60s. So even with my lyrics, I could have gone really deep into, you know, a lyrical approach to this, and I decided to keep it just touching on certain things, but more surface level at that time period, because revolution doesn't have to come in the form all the time of super intensity. Sometimes the smallest idea can create this snowball that turns into the avalanche of a revolution. And that's where I'm at. I'm These are the kernels of the revolution, not the actual revolution itself. So that's what the show is kind of like about, if that makes sense.
Oh, that's very beautifully put.
Thank you. Thanks. And it's heartfelt on my end. It's heartfelt.
Oh,
Um,
completely.
yeah.
Completely.
And that's how I started. That's how I grew up, and that's what I lived under. And I believe that, about freedom like in our country, we talk about freedom of religion, and I believe, yes, we freedom of religion and freedom from religion is just as important to me. Separation of church and state. I don't want any religion. I don't want any thoughts. I don't want not just religion, but I don't want anybody forcing anything upon me. I want to be able to think freely, act freely, and speak freely. And that to me is like that's what makes us who we are, and we should not be infringing upon those rights. Nobody should be infringing upon those rights. Nobody. The state should not be, and individuals should not either.
Of course not. Of course not. But here we are in this environment now, where it's being enacted upon in all different ways.
Absolutely, no doubt.
And it's
no
progressing. It's progressing logarithmically.
In the wrong direction.
In ways that we can't stop either.
Time will change it, right? It will.
Of course,
it'll change over time. The time, right? And I'm not talking about. Look, this how I always felt is by making like flag burning illegal. It's that to me that's un-American, right? Yes, I don't recommend anybody burn the American flag or that matter. I don't. It's not what I'm about. But I defend your right to burn it. That's the important part for me, right? And that's just a simple little, And I don't want to get too much into politics, and that's not really what I'm about. But I'm just saying it ties to the exhibition. It ties to the idea of the exhibition. And as I say to you, what's burned onto bone music at that time is Elvis Presley or Little Richard or, or the Beatles. It's not some kind of, messages of like what Solzhenitsyn was writing about, the atrocities of living, under the Iron Curtain. It's not about that. We're talking about fun music. I want to hold your hand, or Great Balls of Fire.
Yeah, and the idea of I want to hold your hand has even more meaning because it's intimate, it's personal, it's about creating relationships. It's not about having others control us.
Exactly. And I want to hold your hand with mine, and you can hold my hand, and there's an X-ray of a hand there too, so you can hold the hand of the X-ray. Exactly.
I just wanted to say we are just about finished with our time together, and so I wanted to thank you so much for being here. And if there was anything else you wanted to say at the end.
Well, first off, I'd like to thank you very much, China Blue. It's always a pleasure to talk with you in real life and on the podcast. And so I just wanted to say, the exhibition is up until December 20th, New York City, 520 West 24th Street, Lanovich Gallery. And anybody who wants to go see it, I would appreciate that greatly. That's all. That's all I want to say.
And also, if they're not in New York City, they can go to the website, of course, for Leonovich's website to get a preview of the work that will be there.
Absolutely. And they definitely can go on my website as well. So there's lots of ways, and also the music's on SoundCloud that links through to that. So you can hear the music as well that way.
So thank you again, and I'm looking forward to our future conversations. Thank you for listening to this episode of Listening with China Blue. I hope it inspires you to build your own listening practice. This begins as a daily practice of attentively listening without judgment. And ask yourself, what is your version of silence? If you want to learn more about me and my work, go to ChinaBlueArt.com, and please follow me on Facebook and at Instagram. Thank you.